I really think, so I'm a county legislator, this is my district here, and I also chair the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Committee. And one of the things that has really struck me just immensely deeply since I was first elected is just how core to what we do is really keeping people safe. It's really just helping protect people, have fewer injuries, fewer deaths. And I think that there was an immediate, when I was first elected and took office in 2020, immediately we learned this lesson. How do you keep people alive? How do you keep people more alive than would be otherwise without a society that is working for improvement and working to help people? And that was the pandemic, which really taught us that there really is no more core and integral function to governing than just helping protect people. And so there are so many areas that we face in the public sector that we are not giving enough attention to just keeping people safe. And the way that traffic violence is perpetuated is so insidious, and it's so woven into everything else because we have, first of all, a huge need for housing. We're talking about building all kinds of new housing, and one of the things that I think made this site that we started with very important is in the town of Ulster, they're talking about building a ton of housing just just to the west of where we were. And that intersection that we chose, that the organizers chose, was chosen because of the accident where the victim was ticketed, which is crazy. And that is going to be a thoroughfare that people are going to need to travel on if we're going to build the housing that we need to build in the old, Tech City area. And so we have leaders who want to take credit for some of the great development that we're making happen. But there are leaders at every level, and I'm really thinking about town and city leaders here. We can do everything that we want to do at the county to help make some of these developments happen with the resources that we have. But if town leaders, if city leaders, and if planning boards aren't actually enforcing the requirements to make streets safe, then we're going to be creating more issues. I mean, we're going to be creating pathways that don't have, safe access. And that's something that I'm very eager for the county to keep working on and to keep focusing on. We're not going to be able to ticket our way out of these problems. We really need to think more holistically. I do want to acknowledge some folks that are here from the Traffic Safety Board on the county. When I first became chair of the Law Enforcement Committee, one of the first resolutions that came in front of us was to appoint people to the Traffic Safety Board. And I saw the list of people that they were appointing, and it was pretty much entirely police chiefs in surrounding municipalities. And I totally appreciate the role that law enforcement plays in keeping us safe. They played a very important role today in keeping us safe, and I very much appreciate that. But the reality is we need advocates, and we need advocates for victims, advocates for alternative types of transportation that have a voice. So we've been able to add more of those folks to the committee. A few of them are here today, and I'm excited for the work ahead. We have a state that can do a lot more to keep people safe. We need safer passing distances. We need to really think about speed, and we need to think about the way that municipalities are allowed to legislate. There's a lot that we're not allowed to legislate around traffic safety because the state really consumes that playing field, and we have to request that they allow us to make further legislation. And now that they've passed some of the crash victims' rights legislation, but not all of it, I think we should consider going farther than they've gone to make people safer here. And I'm looking forward to doing that in the year ahead. I hope that we can form a coalition where we actually think about how we can make people safer in a very holistic way. And I do want to close also by acknowledging, I'm glad that it was already mentioned today, that today is also Trans Day of Remembrance. And I bring that up not to compare, marginalized groups or to compare, grief of different types of victims. But I was raised by a trans woman who doesn't own a car, so there is some, overlap there. And I feel very deeply for the victims of all types of violence against that community. In particular, in Colorado, what happened yesterday, where that same venue was supposed to have a beautiful brunch today, and instead they're victims of horrible violence. And I want to recognize, as it was also mentioned prior, which I very much appreciate, that we see people of color that are disproportionately overrepresented in the victimhood of trans people and the way that they are attacked, and also in being victims of traffic violence. So the intersectionality is incredibly important because the way that our society treats those that are most marginalized is really the true measure of how well we're doing, and we are not doing well enough. We have a lot of work to do, and this event is a step in that direction, and we need to keep working on this. So I really appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, anyone else need to sign the petition?
It's going that way.
Well, hi, I'm Phil.
Hey, Phil.
The legislator next door to Abe. Thanks for accommodating my late arrival. I was presenting to the Wednesday Walks for Black Lives, which has, of course, been following along the case of the traffic violence victim, Monica Goods, here in Ulster County. Who here knows anyone who has been a victim of traffic violence? All of us. So let's... we can no longer accept this if we ever did. This is something that doesn't just affect the 1,600 or so Kingston residents who don't have cars, or the 5,200 Ulster County families without their own private motor vehicle transportation. I love this petition that we've all just signed because it makes clear the demand that traffic safety prioritize those who are most vulnerable. That should be true of all public safety. That should be true of, frankly, the government in general, right? What would you establish a government for except to protect the weak from the strong? I don't have a whole lot to say. I know, and I missed what most of you have said, so I just want to suggest an idea. How do we defeat traffic and other forms of violence and create a caring culture in its place? Now think about that for a second. I was in a diner last weekend where I heard some folks talking about the new bike lanes around Kingston. And they were complaining about where they are. I admit I have some complaints about where they are. I honestly think that might have contributed to some of the bicyclists who died. But this complaint was from the point of view, I quickly found out, from an uncaring motorist, because they went on to say, that bicyclist, you know, they ran themselves right into that bus.
Boo.
And I should have given you a trigger warning before saying that, but just to even have that attitude exist in our community is cause for tremendous alarm for me. So, we heard from legislator you should tell about what some steps that the government can take in concert with the public, but this is cultural work, my friends. This is changing the way that we think and approach each other as human beings who have a right to live. I recognize our society moves at a fast pace, faster than any of us can keep up with. And for those of us who do drive, and I do drive, sometimes I find myself driving too fast. If you've ever found yourself driving too fast, driving a little dangerous for the conditions, this is going to be hard work, but it starts here. It starts here with each of us making the commitment, however we can, to make that road a little safer for everyone else. If we're a driver, it's actually a really big responsibility that we can do a lot about. If you slow down, somebody might tailgate you and get all pissed off and honk the horn, but honestly, you're making the road safer by slowing down. You're going to force everyone else to slow down. We can things like redesign our streets to make that happen on a more
Yeah.
functional basis. But each little act, if you're not a motorist, if you're a cyclist, I love the idea of a critical mass. We had talked last year at this time about taking Broadway and having a bit of a block party that was non-commercial and designed to say, this is our space, we can be here.
Yeah.
This should be safe for children, this should be safe to be in a wheelchair, it should be safe to push a shopping cart. And sometimes, frankly, here in the city of Kingston, that's not the case even on the sidewalk. I'm so
No
grateful
way.
that we got some state money to help on Franklin Street, and that's going to happen on Henry Street. We need to do that on all the streets. So, in closing, I just want to thank you all for organizing this event and inviting me to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Is there anyone else who would like to say anything or share some thoughts?
So I just want to say, you know, it's kind of a damn shame that we have to be here, and because, as everyone else has already said, this is a problem that we have kind of intentionally designed into our streets and designed into our cities, and that's kind of a nationwide problem. Here in the city of Kingston, we have quite intentionally, through policy, said for the last 60 years that pavement is the way to the future, that parking lots and roads are better than sidewalks and housing. Fortunately, right now, through a strong community effort trying to push the city to rethink its city planning code, we have the opportunity to rethink how this city develops going forward. I know a lot of you have already participated in the Kingston Forward project. That's still, none of that is law yet. It's still a proposal right now. A new draft is going to come out next month. And it's really important that we get a lot of public input to this process. And part of that is a street standard design for all streets as they get redeveloped in the city of Kingston. So it's not an overnight thing, but as streets need to get rebuilt, we can have a standard that says we need proper sidewalks, we need proper bike lanes, we need to have streets for everyone completely,
Yep.
right? You can participate to that by going to the Engage Kingston website or imaginekingston.org. Sign up there. Please share every thought that you have about it. The more community input we get to this process, the better it will be. So that hopefully maybe in another 50 years, like, people won't have to have these kinds of conversations anymore. You know, it's really a policy failure, and it's going to take all of us to try to make that not be the case going forward.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that website?
imaginekingston.org, and there's also information on the Engage Kingston website, which includes all the City of Kingston projects. That this is just one. So, you know, the Complete Streets program really hasn't gone far enough, and you know, the Advisory Council has not really done a whole lot to make sure that this has teeth. And so Tanya's here, who has been fighting strong to make sure that this project actually has some teeth, so that, you know, like Gabe was saying before, that the state DOT can't say, we don't really care about your Complete Streets program, we want to have a highway here, and that's what belongs here. We as local community members need to be able to say, we want streets for people who can walk around, can bike around, and are accessible to everybody, and it's not going to happen unless we really put our feet down and make sure that funding sources allow us, and if we don't want highways, we just need to look for funding from other places, you know, and that's you know, the money can't say that highways are the thing, because quite clearly they're helpful to very few, and are not conducive to an inclusive community that is affordable and sustainable, and a place that probably most of us, not all of us, love.
I'd just like to remember a woman who was like a mother to me for many years, Meg Charlotte, who died on her bicycle in the Bronx by a school bus. And I also want to say that, yeah, it is like a whole culture shift. You know, I feel like it represents so much in the changing of our society in ways where people can just be with each other. So I like to look at it like that. Like, if we slow down, then we're all gonna succeed and become closer to one another by just having walkable streets and places where we can gather. And it also just brings to mind quickly the documentary about New York that Ken Burns did, which was where the Village was sort of created because a woman stood up to Robert Moses and didn't want that big West Side Drive to go through there. And the Village is a beautiful place, and they figured out a way to do it that worked, I think, you know. So I'm really proud of everybody for coming here, and think we can do a lot of good work. Woo!
Okay, if I say something. I'm Kevin Smith. I live in Woodstock. I'm chair of the County Trails Advisory Committee. And I just want to say I'm also liaison to the Woodstock Complete Streets Committee. And I had a chance to talk with Rose the other day and share with her the hard work that's going on right now. Lou Klebner is a liaison to that committee as well, even though he's not a resident of Woodstock, he's a resident of Saugerties. And that's kind of how we need to do this. On a county level, we need complete streets committees in every town. And all working, and Kingston's leading the way here. I know it feels imperfect, and that it fits and starts in 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but you're setting the tone for the whole county here, as the folks are in New Paltz. So I just, you know, it took Holland, it took Denmark 50 years. This movement started in the 70s in Europe. So that's where we need to go now, and it may take 2 generations to get there, but we've got some really good models from around the world and around the country, and we need to connect all of our towns and make it safe for people to move within their communities, to do what they need to do, but also be able to move between their communities. Michael's been working on this a long time, a lot of us have. I do need to say one name, Professor Peter Bacon Hales. He's a professor emeritus of history of photography from the University of Illinois, Chicago. He retired, moved to Stone Ridge because he loved this area. He was on the board, he was a director of the Round Out of Sophus Land Conservancy, and he was killed on Lucas Turnpike, right near the intersection of Lucas Turnpike and Route 209. And the driver wasn't ticketed. It was late in the day, and the sun was in her eyes. That was the reason that she was given for her not receiving the ticket. You know, we got to be better. We can. We can. It's going to take the county, and it's going to take the state, and we have support from the federal government now as well. So let's make this happen.
Yep. Woohoo!
I wanted to just kind of piggyback off what some of the things that have been said. So as far as the federal level is concerned, I really would encourage everybody to listen to the interview between Amy Cohen and Secretary of Transportation, who is messed up his name, Buttigieg. And you know, I was lukewarm on him when he was running for president, but boy, have I changed my mind. So you know, because what they really get to, what he says in a very pointed way, is like, you know, the federal government can only do so much, but local people are the ones who are actually the ones who have to take control of this. We are the ones who know what we need on our streets, and we're the ones who should be advising the advisory boards. That's what we should be doing. I'd also like to mention to everybody you know, we're talking about like, well, what specific language can we use? Well, here's something: safe systems. Safe systems approach to traffic safety. New York State has adopted it. It is basically Vision Zero. It's about as close to Vision Zero as we're going to get in New York State for right now, on a statewide level anyway, right now. And it's important. You know, it basically is saying all the things that we're saying. You have to take, you know, into account what your community needs, and all of the different levels of safety have to be working together. So it's not just, you know, not just planning, it's not just education, it's not just the drivers. This is a collaborative effort, really, to keep people safe. And since most of you guys are also drivers, I'm gonna just give you guys a little bit of a mantra that I like to use every time I get into my car now. Just, you know, kind of sit for a moment and think to yourself, right now I have a privilege that most people in the world actually don't have. That privilege is driving, and that privilege could take somebody's life, could take my own life. And I should just be mindful of that. Not terrified, not saying, but we should understand that. We should understand when we get into our cars that we have a great deal of power that we almost never take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think that's something that each of us as drivers at the very least can agree to. So,
Thanks.
so is there anyone else who would like to say anything? Would you like to speak?
So I think I would just like to say the names of people that I have had in my life who have been killed and injured on the roads. It begins with my grandpa John, my dad's father, and then my aunt Mitia Maria Jesus, who about 3 years ago was killed when she and her daughter were on their morning walk before their day of work.
Oh.
And my aunt was hit by a car. Her daughter watched all of this happen.
Oh.
My aunt did not survive this crash, and it was again called an accident. No charges held. How is that possible? How? But at the same time, this happens so frequently. Like, there has to be change in the laws. There has to be a change there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
It has to be the sanctity of life.
Trying to get to a walking path, which is another thing that
From a residential area, she wanted to get to her walking path by foot, as we all should be able to do.
so you know, not to, well, I mean, I think it is an important thing to remember that, you know, John, my partner, who was killed on Washington Avenue, was coming off bike infrastructure that was supposed to keep him safe. He was on the street for 10 seconds for that entire ride. He was a lifelong rider, but that particular night he was going to stay on the trails, and he lost his life. Darrell Savage was using bike infrastructure that had just been put up for him, and I will always be haunted with the idea that we could have done a hell of a better job explaining to people like Darrell Savage, people who are lifelong bikers, by the way, never got into a bit of trouble in Kingston his whole life. But as his partner put it, when I asked her, I was like, well, why did Darrell make that switch? Like, because he was riding on the sidewalk over there going to the store. Why did he do that? And she said to me, because they put that bike lane up and he thought it was safe.
Oh.
And that will always haunt me. That will always haunt me. So yes, the infrastructure is so important. It's incredibly important. But there's other facets to this that all have to come together to keep us all safe. Because remember, this infrastructure doesn't just keep the walkers and the bikers safe, it actually keeps the drivers safe also, who are, 46,000, approximately 38,000 of them were in their car. The rest of them were outside of their car. So that's pretty significant. So anyone else? Would anyone else like to say anything?
The only thing I'd like to say is like an ideal that always runs through my head is like Broadway used to be, like a streetcar would go up and down. And I'm a volunteer at the Trolley Museum just for that. Like it kind of works together. But I'm like, why doesn't everybody just park the car, keep the old town like it used to be, these little squares, get a huge parking space like a Hannaford, and just start driving up and down with a bus or a streetcar, going up and down Broadway, and use these buses, and just have one side of the road is just for buses. You have less cars, so the people who can't, can get transported, and you have the whole other side. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, that whole, like 5 freaking bikes could go across, half a lane. And if that was just filled with bicycles, and you don't have to use a garage. Anyway, I just think it would make a lot more sense.
I agree.
Yeah.
But nobody asked me.
That's not true. Nobody listens. So, is anyone else have something they'd like to share?
I just want to, something that I thought of, the third bicyclist death, the one on Broadway. He was crossing during the time that we talked about before, where there's the project is almost finished, but it's not finished, and the cars are accommodated right away. But on Broadway, there's the one example of by the YMCA, they didn't make sure that there was a pedestrian signal until the very end. But they also didn't finish the bike lane, and people used it because there were no other accommodations, but it just dead ended. And so where he crossed was as the truck was exiting the traffic circle, crossing over to St. James. There was really no indication of where to go. So it is an example of how that there's that policy that is desperately needed and not acknowledged. So thank you for bringing that up earlier.
Yeah.
And they would do, I think that is, not every single thing has to be a multi-million-dollar project. If we reduce the speed limit to 10 miles an hour in the traffic circle and reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour on Broadway, we would see positive effect. It's that simple. It doesn't all have to be they're great projects, not going to knock the projects, but there's a hell of a lot we can do that does not involve loads and loads of money to keep people safe.
Well, just to go to Port Ewan, there's only like myself walking or myself biking, and this one guy in his wheelchair going across the bridge to Port Ewan in his wheelchair. I mean, he's taking his life even more. It's a motorized one. But I'm like, wow, why isn't there a path for that?
It's a policy failure.
All right. Okay. Well, I think the plan was to get everyone out of here before dark fell. So I think we did that. There is a bus to take people back to the Burlington Coat Factory. I am going to be using it, that's sure. Also, we can jump on the bus to go. Huge thanks to UCAT for offering us the bus. Maybe we could fix it so that we have
UCAT.
every Sunday.
Yes.
Several times
Everywhere.
That would be a nice next step. But
Can you get on it and start going down Broadway a little, or is it just starting to go?
you would have to talk to the driver. I have no objection.
I can head down.
Another photo with the whole group?
That would be great. Yeah.
And if anyone needs